On October 8th, 2022, at about 7:30 a.m., 55-year-old Angela Prichard was arriving for work at the Mississippi Ridge boarding kennels off of Highway 52 in Iowa. 9 minutes later, at 7:39 a.m., the Bellevue Police Department received this phone call.
911, where's your emergency?
Please, get out of here. I have customers coming in. Please.
911.
Please get out of here.
Okay, where are you at?
Correct.
Ma'am, where are you at?
The phone call suddenly disconnects. Fortunately, an officer just so happens to be nearby, so he heads straight to the kennels. The property has 3 buildings, a house at the north end, a house at the south end, and the kennels right between them. Aware that there might be an active shooter inside the kennels, the officer decides to park behind the south end house so the shooter isn't alerted by his presence.
Law 721.
21, go ahead.
I'm approaching the kennel now. I do see one vehicle out front, one vehicle.
As he walks up to the kennels, he can hear a choir of barking dogs.
I don't like this.
The officer momentarily retreats, hesitant to enter without backup.
How far out is my assistant?
But realizing there's no time to lose, he finds the courage to enter the building.
Hello? Angie? Angie?
As he calls Angela's name, another officer arrives at the scene.
I don't know what we got here. They said possible shots fired. Law Center 21, we are going to enter the building.
The officer inches his way down the hall, gun in hand, and at this moment, a pool of blood enters his sight. In the bathing area of the building, Angela was lying face down, unresponsive. They flipped her body over, and a large close-range shotgun wound to her chest was revealed. What could have led up to such a barbaric attack? And more importantly, who was responsible?
911.
Please get out of here.
Okay, where are you at?
Correct.
Chris Prichard has been described as a genuine and kind man, someone who is fun to be around but works very hard for his family. Chris and Angela met in 2017 and dated for 2 years before moving into a Bellevue home together. They got married soon after, in March of 2019, and the couple's relationship flourished, but only for 8 months. Out of nowhere, Chris got fired for stealing $36,000 worth of supplies from the company he worked for. To make matters worse, he was charged with first-degree theft, a felony that can result in a $13,000 fine and 10 years in prison. Chris posted bail, and while awaiting his trial, he became overwhelmed with stress. Over the months, he began drinking more and more and refused to search for another job. But just when he seemed to be at rock bottom, Chris had a sudden boost of motivation and energy. He began working several odd jobs and frequently helped Angela at the kennels. But in the summer of 2021, Angela discovered the source of Chris's newfound energy. He was using heavy stimulants. Then, on April 18th, 2022, Angela told her family that Chris had become physically abusive. Her son immediately called the police, and officers were dispatched to the couple's residence to assess the situation. Angela's sister Wendy was there for support as officers tried to figure out what exactly happened.
He hit me and then I came in the house.
He's very, very, very messed up.
Yeah.
We've seen him change right in front of our eyes, haven't we?
The officers then headed into the garage to confront the man himself.
State of Iowa law requires that somebody goes to jail on physical domestic.
I can't believe I'm going to jail.
Well, she got a mark on her face.
Chris reluctantly cooperated as the officers handcuffed him and escorted him to the back of a police cruiser. He was then brought down to the Jackson County Jail. Now that he was out of the house, Angela took one of the officers into the garage and showed him a hidden tracking device she had found on her vehicle. Heading back inside the house, she pointed out several hidden cameras that Chris had installed.
You have no idea what I go through every single day with him. No idea. It's been getting worse, and it's been getting worse. I don't want him anywhere near me.
It seemed that Chris was not only abusive, but was tracking Angela's every move. The officers had her fill out a form for a no-contact order.
So he can't come back here.
No.
After spending the night behind bars, Chris posted bail. And because of the no-contact order, his family took him in for the time being. But the order didn't stop Chris from reaching out. He immediately texted Angela, claiming that he would change his ways and fix their marriage. And just a few weeks after the no contact order was put in place, Angela lifted it and Chris moved back in. But it wasn't long before Chris's drinking habits and abusive behaviors spiraled out of control again. In her diary, Angela wrote, August 23rd text message, calling me names saying it's going to get real and ugly. Drinking every day. I think Chris is capable of anything. He told my sister he didn't give a if he went to jail. Eventually, Angela decided that enough was enough. She moved in with her sister Wendy, and on September 1st, 2022, she was granted a second no-contact order. However, Angela had left a handful of things at her and Chris's house, so Chris was ordered to move out temporarily while Angela collected these items. But when she went back to the house, it was a disaster. Furniture and picture frames were destroyed, garbage was scattered, and black paint was splattered all over the house. Her mattress had even been relocated to another room in the house, dragged through large dog droppings along the way. Also, in an attempt to scare Angela further, a plethora of guns were scattered throughout the house. In Iowa, no-contact orders require authorities to confiscate any guns during an ongoing abuse case. But Bellevue police did no such thing with Chris. Throughout the rest of September, the acts of psychological warfare continued. On September 15th, he was arrested for sending more texts to Angela because they violated his no-contact order. But within 24 hours, he had posted bail as usual and was free to terrorize her more. He would drive by her house several times a day, violating the no-contact order each time. On one occasion, Chris pulled up next to her at a gas station and just stared at her. When she reported it to the police, they told her, "It's a small town. You will have that." The creepy behavior from Chris didn't stop, so Angela filed police reports over and over. Although the Bellevue Police Department said they would handle it, they didn't seem to be taking any real action against Chris. For example, 7 days before Angela's murder, on October 1st, 2022, an officer responded to one of her reports. He tried to put her mind at ease, telling her that he would have a chat with Chris and the situation would be sorted out.
My job is to protect you at all costs. Because right now, I can guarantee he's not thinking straight.
No, not at all.
That's my biggest fear. That's my department's biggest fear is he's going to try to hurt you.
But despite all of this foresight, nothing was done to prevent Angela's murder.
We got lady down, lady down. Scene clear, scene clear.
As the officers cleared the building of any threats, they noticed a trail of blood drops leading toward one of the kennel exits. An all-points bulletin was put out to alert law enforcement within the area that a suspect was at large.
Why don't you secure that outbuilding? Law Center, make sure you get an out points out for a suspect.
6 different law enforcement agencies heard this broadcast, including Iowa's Department of Criminal Investigations, who then took over the case. Law enforcement split up to search the other houses on the property. They checked every nook and cranny, but were unsuccessful in finding their suspect. However, they were able to gain access to the North End house's security camera, which just barely overlooks the kennel parking lot. Throughout the entire night, there was no movement, but at 4:20 a.m., they heard something peculiar. Something had suddenly alerted the dogs in the kennel. 3 hours later, at 7:34 a.m., Angela can be seen arriving at work, pulling into her parking spot, and gathering her things before heading into the building. 5 minutes later, at 7:39 a.m., the same time as Angela's 911 call, a gunshot can be heard. 2 minutes after that, at 7:41 a.m., Chris can be seen casually walking along the fence line, away from the scene. Unfortunately, it's hard to say exactly where Chris went from here, so the investigators weighed their options. Directly behind the kennels is what locals call the wilderness, a dense forest that stretches for miles, separated by the property fence line. Chris, an avid hunter, was very familiar with the wilderness. However, law enforcement was not, making it the perfect place for Chris to flee. But there are also many properties surrounding the kennels where Chris may have sought refuge. Law enforcement once again split up, some heading into the wilderness while others expanded the search into the surrounding farmland. Even in the empty fields, the officers were on high alert, just in case Chris was lurking somewhere in the tall grass. As they continued their manhunt, they cleared several abandoned structures and eventually ended up at a series of farm properties. They searched any barns and sheds that Chris could be hiding in, but they repeatedly had no luck. During this search, Bellevue Police Department received a 911 call from a woman named Lori Blauser.
I see you guys are looking for Chris Prichard.
Yes.
His truck is in our garage.
Lori and her husband Mike were friends with Chris and had supported him throughout his and Angela's turbulent relationship. They lived just a few miles away from the kennels. Officers rushed to their ranch and surrounded the garage, guns drawn in case Chris was inside. They entered carefully and made sure the building was safe before inspecting Chris's truck.
Clear in here, Jim.
The coast was clear, so they opened up the vehicle and found a note from Chris to Mike Blaser. It read, "Hey Mike, came to take these lights down. I just had 7 coyote cross the road in front of me about a mile up the road. I'm gonna go try to kill a couple of them. Keys are in the truck if you need to move it. I'll be back. Chris." The Blasers allowed investigators to access their home security camera, and the night before, their dog can be seen barking at Chris as he enters the garage. Although this helped the authorities establish a timeline leading up to the shooting, his current whereabouts were still unknown. They headed to some more populated neighborhoods and knocked door to door.
Is that the guy they're looking for? Right there, Chris Prichard. You guys know Chris Prichard, don't you?
While many of the locals knew who Chris Prichard was, they had no idea where he could be.
Has he been known to come out here every once in a while?
Yeah, I haven't seen him though today. I'll let you know if I see anything or hear anything.
The officers warned everybody that Chris was a suspect in the shooting of his wife Angela, and to keep their eye out for him. One of the couples they warned was cattle farmer Jeff Junk and his girlfriend Kim Klein. Later that day at 8:15 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Jeff opened the door and there was Chris, still holding the shotgun he killed Angela with. He handed the gun over to Jeff and told them that he had been running from the police and their dogs all day. Jeff then confronted him about the shooting, and Chris responded with, "Oh yeah, how's she doing?" They told him she was dead, but he essentially had no reaction and started making small talk. Jeff and Kim had no choice but to play along until they felt it was safe to call the police. So they invited him inside and acted like nothing had happened. They told stories, laughed, and drank together for the rest of the evening, as you can see in this photo taken by Kim. Then, at about midnight, Chris suddenly passed out in their lazy boy chair. Jeff took this opportunity to text the chief deputy to come get their suspect. Chris was abruptly awoken by the police dragging him out of the house. He seemed terribly inconvenienced.
What's wrong with you guys? Christ, I was sleeping.
While cuffing him, the officers noticed a cut on his hand.
Looks like he's got a cut to his left thumb.
This would explain the trail of blood drops back at the crime scene.
Yep, I think we're good to go in then.
While Chris was being transported to the Jackson County Jail, the investigators gathered any evidence that Chris had brought into the house. This included shotgun ammo, loose change, a utility knife, torn up jeans, the 20-gauge shotgun itself, and Angela's bank cards and phone. Chris arrived at the jail and was escorted out of the cruiser and into the building. He was clearly exhausted after a long day of running from the police. He waddled his way through the jailhouse, looking more like a scared, wounded animal than a cold-blooded killer. The officers threw him in his cell, and Chris was able to get a few more hours of sleep before he was awoken by the lead detectives, Special Agents Dustin Henningsen and Ryan Kedley. They brought him into a quiet room for an interview. Chris gave them his side of the story about what had happened at the kennels.
She said, you gotta leave now or I'm gonna call the police. Well, I said, I just want to talk. And she shoved me. And I hit the cabinet. The gun, I don't know what the gun hit, but it went off.
Chris told several versions of this story throughout the interview. First, he said that they got into an argument and Angela shoved him. As he fell back into the cupboards, he accidentally shot her with the gun.
And it looked like it hit her in the arm. How would you die from that?
Then he said the gun was leaning against the cupboard, and as he left to grab a bag from another room, the gun fell and somehow misfired. However, according to the medical examiner, the gunshot had a downward trajectory, meaning the shooter, aka Chris, had to have been holding the gun when it was fired. But you don't need a medical examiner in order to conclude that Chris had intentionally killed her.
You show up at a place where you know she's going to be. You've got a gun with her. You know you've got a no contact order. An argument breaks out. She calls 911. She winds up dead. This wasn't just some accident.
Despite common sense working against him, Chris continued to insist that he loved Angela and would never do something like that on purpose. But if it really was an accident, why did he proceed to steal her phone and bank cards and then abandon her at the scene to die?
I would have loved to have stuck around with Angie and her temper. I thought maybe it didn't even really hit her that bad because she was yelling at me like she wasn't even hurt.
This statement is a blatant lie. In the 911 call, Angela goes completely silent after being shot.
Okay, where are you at? Ma'am, where are you at?
And this call begs another question. Why would he say you directly after she was shot? The detectives asked Chris why he was at the kennels in the first place. He admitted that he was upset about the no contact order and went there to confront her about it.
She wanted to drag me through the mud and make me a monster.
Chris refused to give a full confession, but thankfully for the detectives, he did admit to shooting Angela one way or another, fleeing the scene, and also provided them with a crystal clear motive: anger regarding the no contact order. The detectives had everything they needed, so they wrapped up the interview, and Chris was charged with the first-degree murder and robbery of Angela Prichard.
On new information tonight, a man out of Bellevue has been charged with first-degree murder in the death of his wife. After admitting to law enforcement, he shot her and later left the scene.
At his arraignment, Chris pled not guilty to his charges. His bail was set at $1 million, an amount he could not pay. On February 7th, 2024, his trial began. The prosecution laid out the timeline of events leading up to the shooting. It just so happens that on October 7th, the day before the shooting, Angela's second no-contact order against Chris became permanent. The prosecution suggested that this caused him to snap, and he devised a plan for revenge, taking several steps to cover his tracks. The white pickup truck the investigators found in the Blazer's garage wasn't actually his. He borrowed it from a friend so that he didn't have to take his own vehicle. He stowed the truck in the Blazer's garage, and after spending some time in there doing who knows what, he trekked in the middle of the night through the wilderness all the way to the kennels, where he snuck into the building and laid in wait. When Angela arrived for work, he confronted her.
Please, get out of here. I have customers coming in.
And in a fit of rage, he shot her in the chest. He then stole her belongings and fled the scene. Despite the mountain of evidence against Chris, his defense claimed that the investigators had rushed to prosecute him. They believed that there was zero conclusive evidence pointing to Angela being killed intentionally. The trial lasted for 4 days, and after jury deliberations, they came back with a verdict. Chris Prichard was found guilty for the murder of his wife, Angela. Watching from the gallery, her family was overwhelmed with emotions. On March 22, 2024, during Chris's sentencing hearing, Angela's sister Wendy gave an impact statement. She said, "No words can fill the void we all have in our lives now, but knowing Angie got the justice she deserves will help." Angela's father also gave a statement in which he spoke directly to Chris, calling him a dog and a coward. Following the family's impact statements, Chris was also given an opportunity to speak. He told the court, "I want to tell the family how sorry I am. I did not go there to hurt Angie that morning. I am so sorry this happened, and I really wish it wouldn't have." Chris was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although Chris was now locked up for good, he wasn't the only one that Angela's family wanted to hold accountable. In April of 2024, they filed a lawsuit against the Bellevue Police Chief Dennis Schroeder, officers Ryan Cloft, and Shelby Mutzel, and the city of Bellevue itself. According to the lawsuit, when Chris repeatedly violated Angela's no-contact order, the police did not enforce this order despite knowing that Angela was in danger. This is because the officers were close acquaintances with Chris. They claimed that the negligence of the department put Angela's life in danger by enabling and fostering Chris's ability to murder her, and she may still be alive today if the officers had actually done their job. But in October of 2024, Chief Judge C.J. Williams of the U.S. District Court dismissed the family's lawsuit, writing that he was skeptical that more aggressive conduct by the officers would have changed anything. The judge said, arguably, one could equally speculate that it was the officer's arrest of Christopher for violating the no-contact order that angered him enough to kill Angela. The judge also said that the relationship between Chris and the officers was a far cry from a friendship. But Angela's family wouldn't go down without a fight. They refiled the lawsuit, and during a hearing in December of 2024, they shared additional evidence with the court. Emails show that 9 days before Angela was murdered, Chris was supposed to turn himself in after breaching the no-contact order. But he was a no-show, and an arrest warrant was issued. Strangely, there was zero effort from the Bellevue Police Department to execute this warrant. The officers claimed that they had no idea that Angela was in danger, but Chief Schroeder was the same officer from this body cam we showed earlier.
My job is to protect you at all costs. That's my biggest fear. That's my department's biggest fear is He's going to try to hurt you.
Clearly, the department was well aware that Angela was in danger. Additionally, during the initial lawsuit, the other two officers claimed they were not customers of the Mississippi Ridge Kennel. But according to receipts, they were customers there and even received discounts. The family's attorney, David O'Brien, was optimistic that this new evidence would sway the judge's decision.
Our ideal outcome would be just complete reversal of the judge's decision.
Unfortunately, not even the new evidence could sway the judge's opinion. In January of 2025, Judge Williams denied the second lawsuit as well. Chief Schroeder followed up by releasing a statement to the public. He said, "We are pleased with the decision, but also grateful for the community support of the Bellevue Police Department. We continue to strengthen our services and response efforts to prevent domestic violence and provide support to those in need." Angela's family plans on appealing Judge Williams' decision by taking their lawsuit to a higher court. Chris Prichard remains behind bars and currently resides at the Iowa State Penitentiary in Fort Madison, Iowa. As for the Mississippi Ridge boarding kennels, they now have new ownership and are open for business.